It was a warm Friday afternoon in early June, just days before the start of summer break. I had spent the day with my friends at our usual hangout spot, the local park in my hometown of Maplewood, Michigan. The sun was high and the air was filled with the sounds of children playing and the distant hum of traffic. We were all excited for the freedom that summer promised. No more early mornings, no more homework, just endless days of relaxation. I remember feeling particularly carefree as I walked home, my backpack light and my mind already drifting to the plans we had for the next few weeks. As I turned onto my street, I noticed something odd. A silver sedan was parked a little too close to the curb, and its engine was running despite the vehicle being completely still. The driver's seat was empty, and the car had a vague, unsettling aura about it. I shrugged it off as a coincidence and continued towards my house. But when I reached my front porch, I saw that the car had moved slightly forward, as if someone had just been there watching. The oddness of the situation gnawed at me, but I dismissed it, blaming my overactive imagination. That evening, I went to the grocery store to grab a few essentials. The store was bustling with people preparing for the weekend. While I was at the checkout, I noticed a man who seemed out of place. He was standing near the exit, dressed in a plain gray jacket and baseball cap, staring intently at the shoppers. He was calm but carried an air of discomfort, and every time our eyes met, he looked away quickly. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, and the uneasy sensation lingered as I left the store. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I received a strange message on my phone. It was from an unknown number and contained just a single sentence. "I saw you today." My heart skipped a beat. I tried calling the number back, but it went straight to voicemail. I assumed it was a prank or a wrong number, but the message felt too specific to ignore. I decided to tell my parents about it, but when I showed them the message, they brushed it off as a harmless joke. The next day I noticed something even more disturbing. While I was out in the yard, I found a small handwritten note pinned to the front door of our house. It read, "I know where you live." I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was no signature, no clues as to who might have left it. The handwriting was neat and precise, which only added to the chilling effect. I showed the note to my parents again, and this time they took it more seriously, suggesting we should contact the authorities. The police arrived and took the note for fingerprints, but they assured us it was likely just a prank. Despite their reassurances, the tension in our house was palpable. I found it hard to relax, and every little sound made me jump. My parents decided to install a security camera at the front of the house, hoping it would provide some peace of mind. However, even with the extra security, the feeling of being watched never fully went away. 2 nights later, around midnight, I was woken by a noise outside my window. I peered through the blinds and saw a figure moving around the driveway. I couldn't make out any details, but it was clear that someone was there. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the figure was gone. They found no signs of forced entry or anything unusual, leaving me feeling more paranoid than ever. The unease that had begun as a minor annoyance was now a constant source of fear. Determined to find out who was tormenting us, I began my own investigation. I reviewed the footage from the security camera, but it showed only vague shadows and indistinct shapes. I started asking around the neighborhood, hoping someone might have seen something suspicious. My search yielded no results, and the feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. Every day, it seemed like the threat was getting closer, but I couldn't figure out how or why. One afternoon, while going through old family photos in the attic, I stumbled upon an old box of my grandfather's belongings. Among them, I found a faded photograph of a man who looked eerily similar to the one I had seen near the grocery store. There was also a small notebook filled with scribbled notes and strange symbols. My heart raced as I realized the connection. This man had been in our lives before, and somehow he had returned. I showed the photograph and notebook to my parents, and they were visibly shaken. They contacted the police again, providing them with the new evidence. This time, they took it more seriously, launching a deeper investigation into the man's identity. Meanwhile, my anxiety continued to escalate. I felt trapped in my own home, unable to escape the oppressive sense of dread that followed me everywhere. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I heard a loud knock on the front door. When I opened it, there stood the man from the photograph, his face twisted into a sinister smile. I was paralyzed with fear as he calmly said, "I've been waiting for this." Before I could react, he pushed past me and entered the house. I tried to call for help, but he quickly disabled the phone lines. The confrontation that followed was intense and terrifying, but I managed to escape and hide until the police arrived. After the man was apprehended, we learned that he had been a distant relative with a history of unstable behavior. The police investigation revealed that he had been tracking us for weeks, using the notes and messages to intimidate us. Although we were safe, the trauma of those events lingered. Every time I hear a knock on the door or see an unfamiliar face, my heart races, and the memories of that unsettling summer come rushing back. The terror might be over, but the fear remains. It was supposed to be the best day of my senior year at Lakewood High in Seattle. We had just wrapped up our last exam before summer break, and the entire senior class was buzzing with excitement for the graduation party. It was a sunny June afternoon, and the smell of barbecued burgers wafted from the backyard of one of the most popular students, Jake Miller. His house, a sprawling suburban estate in the heart of Greenwood, was the perfect venue for our end-of-year bash. Everyone was dressed to impress, and the atmosphere was electric, with music blasting from the speakers and laughter echoing through the neighborhood. I felt like the whole year was finally paying off. As I pulled into Jake's driveway, I noticed a man standing by his old, rusted van parked on the edge of the lot. He was dressed in a dark hoodie and seemed out of place, especially among the cars of our well-dressed classmates. His eyes, hidden beneath the brim of his hat, followed me as I walked past. I dismissed it as an odd coincidence, maybe someone who had come to crash the party or a neighbor curious about the commotion. I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease, but I shrugged it off as pre-party jitters. When I entered the party, Jake greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, but something about his demeanor felt off. He seemed distracted, and he quickly directed me to the backyard where the rest of the party was in full swing. As I settled in, a few friends mentioned that Jake had been acting strange all day, even sending out random invitations to people who weren't part of our senior class. The odd behavior seemed to be the talk of the party, but with everyone's attention divided among the games and food, it didn't seem to warrant much concern. As the evening progressed, the party's energy shifted. I noticed a few people gathering around the fire pit, speaking in hushed tones, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They looked uneasy, and when I approached to join the conversation, they fell silent. It was as if they were hiding something. The music suddenly cut off and a collective murmur of confusion spread through the crowd. I scanned the room for Jake, but he was nowhere to be seen. I decided to search for Jake, hoping he was just caught up with last-minute preparations or needed a moment to himself. I ventured through the house, finding the rooms eerily quiet, the lively party scene seeming like a distant memory. When I reached the basement door, I heard faint noises coming from below, muffled voices and what sounded like shuffling footsteps. The door was slightly ajar, and I hesitated before pushing it open, feeling a strange mixture of curiosity and fear. Descending into the basement, I was greeted by an unsettling sight. The room was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb casting long shadows on the walls. The basement was cluttered with old furniture and boxes, but it was the strange, half-open trunk in the corner that caught my attention. I approached it cautiously and peeked inside, only to find it filled with personal belongings, things that clearly didn't belong to Jake. Old photographs, notebooks, and various trinkets that suggested someone had been using the space for a long time. As I was examining the trunk, I heard footsteps approaching the basement stairs. Panicked, I quickly closed the trunk and hid behind some old boxes. From my hiding spot, I saw two figures descend the stairs, Jake and the man from the parking lot. Their conversation was muffled, but I could make out snippets about keeping it quiet and, "We need to finish before they find out." My heart raced, and I struggled to stay quiet, my mind racing with questions and fears about what was happening. The conversation ended abruptly, and the two figures retreated back upstairs. I waited a few minutes to ensure they were gone before emerging from my hiding place. I tried to leave quietly, but just as I was heading for the stairs, the basement door burst open, and several masked individuals stormed in. They seemed to be searching for something, or someone. The tension was palpable, and I realized with a cold dread that I was in serious danger. Desperate, I made my way to a small window near the ceiling, hoping to escape unnoticed. Just as I was about to climb through, I heard one of the masked individuals calling out for Jake. My heart sank as I saw Jake appearing at the top of the stairs, looking anxious and defeated. He exchanged hurried words with the intruders, who seemed to be pressing him for information. I managed to slip through the window, dropping into the yard and scrambling for cover behind some bushes. From my hiding spot, I could see the masked individuals scouring the yard, their flashlights sweeping over every corner. I knew I had to leave before they discovered me. I waited until the searchers were distracted by something else, then crept toward the driveway. With adrenaline pumping, I hopped into my car and sped off. The image of the basement and the masked intruders burned into my memory. The next morning, I saw on the news that Jake's house had been raided by the police. They had found evidence of illegal activities and a disturbing number of missing person reports linked to the basement. The news anchor mentioned that the masked individuals were part of a human trafficking ring, and Jake was believed to be involved in aiding them. I was stunned. My night of celebration had turned into a nightmare, and I was left questioning what I had seen and how deep the conspiracy went. Even after all this time, I still feel a shiver whenever I drive past Jake's house. The party was supposed to be a joyous end to a chapter of my life, but instead, it became a reminder of the dark underbelly that can lurk behind even the most innocent facades. I often wonder if the people who helped Jake are still out there, and if they ever saw me escaping that night. The knowledge that I narrowly avoided becoming a victim myself haunts me daily, making me wary of the seemingly ordinary events that can hide the darkest secrets. It was the last day of school before summer vacation, a day that should have been filled with excitement and anticipation. The sun was shining brightly over Lakewood High School in Seattle, where I had spent the last 4 years of my life. My friends and I were chatting excitedly in the parking lot, our minds already on summer plans. There was a palpable buzz in the air, but something seemed off to me. Maybe it was the strange lingering feeling that had been growing over the past week, or talvez fosse o peso da finalidade do dia. Whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that this day was about to become something far more unsettling than any of us could have anticipated. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of classes, I noticed a man lingering near the school's entrance. He was dressed in a dark hoodie, his face partially obscured by the hood. He seemed out of place, and his intense gaze made me uncomfortable. I tried to shake it off, attributing it to the heightened nerves of the last day of school. However, as I left the building and headed to my car, I saw him again, standing across the street watching. The eerie feeling that had been bothering me all day intensified. I told myself he was just another local who happened to be there, but deep down, I felt a growing sense of dread. Later that afternoon, I was driving home when my car sputtered and came to a stop on a deserted stretch of road. I pulled into an old abandoned gas station nearby. The station had been closed for years, its pumps rusted and empty. The building was dilapidated with shattered windows and peeling paint. As I waited for roadside assistance, I noticed a figure moving inside the station, briefly illuminated by the setting sun. My heart raced as I strained to see through the grime-covered windows. I was alone and began to feel a rising panic. The isolation and the unknown presence inside the gas station were a combination that made my skin crawl. While waiting, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I answered, hoping it was my roadside assistance, but instead, I heard heavy breathing and a distorted voice on the other end. The voice was unfamiliar and unsettling. It said, "I see you." I hung up quickly, my hands shaking. The call left me feeling exposed and terrified. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, but the fear was overwhelming. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the encounter while simultaneously being unable to ignore the growing sense of danger. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for help. When I heard a vehicle approaching, relief washed over me, but it quickly turned to dread when I saw a dark, unmarked van pull into the gas station. The driver, a tall man with an unreadable expression, stepped out and walked towards the building. I saw him through the cracks in the window, but he didn't seem to notice me. As he disappeared inside, I heard unsettling noises, clattering and thumping. My anxiety escalated as I realized that the van and the man were not part of any roadside assistance service I had contacted. The minutes ticked by and no one emerged from the station. My phone had lost signal and I felt completely isolated. I decided to investigate, my fear outweighing my rational thoughts. I slowly approached the building, every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet amplifying my anxiety. Inside, the gas station was eerily silent. The faint glow of the setting sun barely penetrated the darkness inside. I searched the building, finding it empty except for a few discarded items and strange stains on the floor. The van was gone, and I was left alone, even more unsettled than before. As I prepared to leave, I noticed a fresh scratch on the side of my car, as if someone had deliberately marked it. My heart raced as I realized that I had been followed and targeted. I quickly drove away from the gas station, trying to put as much distance between myself and the eerie location as possible. My mind raced with the implications of what had happened. The stranger, the unsettling phone call, the abandoned gas station. Everything seemed connected, and the realization that I was being watched and followed left me feeling vulnerable and scared. Once home, I found a note taped to my door. It was written in shaky handwriting, and it simply read, "You can't hide from me." My blood ran cold as I read the note, trying to understand what it meant. The message was a chilling confirmation of my fears. I considered contacting the police but hesitated, unsure if they would take me seriously or say "Isso fazia parte de plano maior e mais sinistro." The sense of being hunted was overwhelming, and I felt trapped in a nightmarish reality I couldn't escape from. That night, I received another call from the same unknown number. The voice on the other end was more menacing this time, whispering threats and taunting me. It felt like a game to him, and I was the unwilling participant. I tried to trace the call, but it was coming from an untraceable number. The constant harassment was driving me to the brink. I could hardly sleep, my paranoia growing with every shadow and every creak in the house. The fear of what might happen next was almost more than I could bear. The following day, I decided to confront my fears head-on. I went to the police station to report everything that had happened. The officer on duty listened, but his skepticism was evident. He promised to file a report, but gave little reassurance. Feeling disheartened, I returned home, only to find that my house had been broken into. It was clear that someone had been inside, searching through my belongings. The invasion of my personal space was a violation I couldn't ignore. It became evident that my stalker was growing bolder. That night, I received a knock on my door. Through the peephole, I saw no one but heard someone moving around outside. I didn't answer, but the knocking continued, growing more insistent. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of anyone. The patrol officers assured me it was probably a prank, but I knew better. The fear that had been building up over the past few days had reached a breaking point. I felt trapped and hopeless, unsure of what to do next. In the days that followed, the harassment continued, but the police were unable to make any progress. My life had turned into a constant state of fear and anxiety. The sense of being watched never left me, and the feeling of dread became a part of my daily existence. I moved away from Seattle, hoping to escape the terror, but the psychological scars remained. The mystery of who had targeted me and why never truly resolved. The terror I experienced left an indelible mark on my psyche, reminding me that some fears are never fully laid to rest.